Hello and welcome. My name is Meepolis, they, she, he, and this is Literally Graphic. And today we're looking at Graphic Reproduction, a comics anthology edited by Jenell Johnson. This collection was published by the Pennsylvania State University Press Graphic Medicine imprint in 2018. As far as contributors go, there is a lot of overlap with the graphic medicine comics anthology Menopause, a comic treatment that I reviewed earlier this year. Of course, for whatever reason, I didn't go into creator bios that time around, so we'll still be doing that here, but link in the cards in case that sounds interesting to you. Content notes for desexualized nudity, pregnancy loss, infertility, child death, abortion, and many other things related to different kinds of reproductive stories, plus one frame that includes a depiction of the village people, including one in a war bonnet. I don't usually include recommendations for other media in these reviews, but I just listened to the latest episode of Sexting History, which was all about a minister turned abortion provider who founded a clinic in Texas that briefly moved to New Mexico before Roe versus Wade originally passed, aimed squarely at low-income people. As a Christian person, I'm more than aware of the way that people like me have made abortion impossible to access for many people, particularly lower class and people of color. But there's also a long tradition of faith leaders of all stripes seeing how immoral these anti-abortion laws are and fighting the system. Well, and not even to mention that white Protestants never cared about the, quote, morality of abortion before desegregation. But that's a story for another time. Link in the description to that episode. And now let's dive into a detailed list of what stories appear in this collection, with some commentary. This is not the order that they appear in the book, but rather the order in which they were originally created. First, we have Abortion Eve, which was published in 1973 by Joyce Farmer and Lyn Chevley. This contribution is certainly a key part of why I picked this book up. Asking on Mastodon for more comics that feature abortion, this was one of the first recommendations I got, but I wasn't sure how I would get my hands on it. A really interesting read. I don't think I've read a contemporary comic by women from the 70s, so that was also very interesting, culturally speaking. Such a different time and place. This is the only story that, in its original standalone existence, actually tried to include obvious visible diversity of its characters and also the circumstances that brought them to the abortion clinic. Flipping to the back of the book, Lyn Chevley is described as, quote, an American cartoonist, writer, editor, publisher, and pioneering participant in the underground comics movement. She died in 2016. She was best known for her other work with Joyce Farmer on the Tits and Clits comics series from 1972 to 1987, end quote, which is being republished by Fantagraphics in 2023. I'll let you know what I think. And besides also collaborating on Tits and Clits, Joyce Farmer also won a National Cartoonist Society Reuben Award for her 2010 graphic novel Special Exits, which was also nominated for an Eisner Award. Then we had Anatomy of a New Mom by Carol Tyler, originally published in 1988. This is a dramatic one-page infographic that I really liked. Tyler is described as, quote, a master cartoonist and a pioneer of the autobio comic genre. Her work includes the books The Job Thing, Late Bloomer, Soldier's Heart, Fab for Mania, and the trilogy You'll Never Know, work spanning 1993 to 2012. She also teaches comics at the University of Cincinnati, end quote. Thirdly, we had the final story in the collection, which was an excerpt from Dykes to Watch Out For, namely Spawn of Dykes to Watch Out For, published in 1993 by Alison Bechdel. While I've read everything that Bechdel has published, I've always found her a bit hard to make content about because Bechdel feels like one of those creators that everything has been said already. Of course, last year I did review her latest memoir comic, The Secret to Human Strength. Check out the card for the review, which will include a bio. And her first two memoir comics are on my next round of A to Z of Queer Lit video. So keep a weather eye open for more Bechdel discussion. Next, we jump forward 2 decades to Spooky Womb by Paula, published in 2012, an irreverent look at the ways that wombs can haunt their humans. Then in 2013, we had Ex Utero, a cluster of comics, also by Paula. This second work is a very appealing collage, almost scrapbookish comic about the difficult feelings around an early miscarriage. Knight is described as, quote, an author, illustrator, and comic creator illustrator working in the United Kingdom. Her first graphic memoir, The Facts of Life, was published in 2017. End quote. Sixth, we have A Significant Loss, The Story of My Miscarriage by Edrene Shepherd, published in 2014. A poignant work about a loss later in pregnancy. I appreciated Shepherd's honest depiction of letting the miscarriage complete naturally because, as she says, quote, natural is better, right? Question mark? And Edrene is described as a, quote, Canadian artist hailing from Penticton, British Columbia. She learned how to handle watercolors from her grandfather and has made art the focal point of her life for as long as she has existed, end quote. Also published in 2014, we had Pregnant Butch, 9 Long Months Spent in Drag by A.K. Summers, a work I have complicated feelings about. On the one hand, yes, the perspective of a butch person going through pregnancy is a valuable contribution to any conversation about pregnancy and birth. On the other hand, the original book does include a rant against HRT and how all the butches are now trans men, which is obviously not only stupid, but also hateful and dangerous. So yeah, I didn't have a super fun time with this section. That said, this part of Summers' quote, story was not included in this anthology. The written introduction does also nod towards inclusion of trans people by pointing out that people of all genders can get pregnant, and the final discussion guide in comic form is co-written by a trans man. So while I have no idea if Summers still holds to these transphobic beliefs, let me know if you happen to be privy to that information. There was some effort to not have this collection actively perpetuate transphobia. That said, it would have been nice to have some more trans stories. Plus, they still left in the Village People reference that included a random person in a war bonnet. Eighth was a significant chunk of Not Funny Haha by Leah Hayes, published in 2015. I actually reviewed this standalone comic earlier this year. I'll link to that in the cards. Also published in 2015 on BuzzFeed News, so free to read. We have Overwhelmed, Anxious, and Angry, Navigating Postpartum Depression by Jessica Zucker, PhD clinical psychologist, and Ryan Alexander Tanner, the only color story in the anthology. It's a bit of a PSA, but all too necessary to combat all the rose-tinted depictions of new moms being nothing but bubbling positivity. Zucker is, quote, a Los Angeles-based psychologist specializing in women's reproductive and maternal health. She is the creator of the hashtag I Had a Miscarriage campaign, end quote. And clicking over to his Patreon, Ryan Alexander Tanner describes himself as a, quote, comic artist, illustrator, and art teacher, best known for illustrating the Dave's Killer Bread logo. He is the co-author with Bill Ayers and illustrator of To Teach, The Journey in Comics, published by Columbia University's Teachers College Press. Ninth, we have Present/Perfect by this collection's editor, Jenell Johnson, published in 2016. It's clear to see where Johnson's passion for this project comes from. Her story about struggling both physically and emotionally with infertility was not an easy read, but so important. You aren't guaranteed success just because you try really hard or spend a lot of money. You don't even earn a baby by being generally good. The one thing I would add is that, as TikTok has made abundantly clear to me this year, struggling with infertility also doesn't give you the right to someone else's children either, particularly not their apparently able-bodied white babies. TLDR, the adoption industry is extremely unethical and harmful to children. Look it up. Jenell Johnson is described as, quote, the Mellon Morgridge Professor of the Humanities and an Associate Professor of Communication Arts at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, end quote. Then in 2017, we have Losing Thomas and Ella, A Father's Story, a research comic by Marcus B. Weaver-Hightower, another one of the comics I probably would not have had access to otherwise, and Distinct. Certainly one of the tougher stories to get through. This story covers hard birth, premature birth, and stillbirth. Marcus is a, quote, professor of educational foundations and research at the University of North Dakota. His research focuses on boys and masculinity, the use of comics and graphic knowledge in qualitative methods, and in education, food politics, and the politics and sociology of education and policy, end quote. Then most recently, we have the 10th short story Pushing Back by Bethany Doane, also published in 2017, the story of a home birth and subsequent hospital perpetuated trauma when Doane goes to the hospital to be stitched up without her baby, and they don't believe her when she tells them the baby is okay, and send police and firefighters to her house. My goodness. Doane is, quote, a PhD candidate at Penn State University in English and women's gender and sexuality studies. Her current project works to develop new feminist and anti-racist reading practices by looking at horror fiction and film in the weird tradition. End quote. Flipping through this anthology, I appreciate the level of diversity reached and the way that Johnson highlights the harder stories about reproduction. That said, as I already pointed out, I would have appreciated more trans and adjacent stories. There also seemed to be a lack of diversity when it came to the race of the creators, which is obviously a problem. It would also be interesting to hear more stories from the perspective of disabled people, who are often seen as unfit and desexualized. That said, I do think that infertility itself, which was explored in this collection, is a kind of disability, or at least in the space outside of being fully able-bodied. What do you think? On a more mundane level, I'm not always thrilled about reading anthologies of all previously published work, despite the plus that some of these stories were not generally available otherwise. This and the subsequent overlap with the menopause comic anthology ended up making this feel a little bit on the insular side. And while, as someone who went to school for graphic design, I can appreciate that sometimes there are hard limits for print. It was slightly off-putting to not have the comics pages go full printed page, particularly in the case of Abortion Eve and Not Funny Haha, which have slightly different background colors to their pages that makes the cropping painfully obvious. Bye y'all, keep reading and organize to end capitalist oppression. And as always, Literally Graphic is created on land that should be given back to the traditional landholders, which in this case is, to my knowledge, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, non-Anishinaabe people, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat Nation.